Hey there, my name is Branko, but you can call me Caillou, and today we will be building this juicy and controversial tier list about the best male tennis players of all time. Leave a comment and leave a like if you would like me to do the best female tennis players of all time. I would love to make that video as well. Now, before getting right into it, I just want to say that, of course, the major parameters in my decision making will be number of Grand Slams won, number of tournaments won, consecutive weeks as number one or cumulative weeks as number one in the world, play style, backhand, forehand, but I also want to go a little beyond that scope, and I am also going to analyze how impactful that tennis player was in the history of the game. And finally, these players, I have seen all of them. Of course, some of them I could just see videos on YouTube, others I have seen live even. So it's my opinion here. If you have another opinion, I will be very happy to hear you down in the comment section. I'll try to be as objective as possible. And let's get into it. Alright, so here we have Mr. Andre Agassi, Arthur Ashe, Boris Becker, Bjorn Borg, Sergi Bruguera, Jimmy Connors, Jim Courier, Novak Djokovic, Stefan Edberg, Roger Federer, Juan Carlos Ferrero, Leighton Hewitt, Kafelnikov, Jan Kodes, Kriek, Gustavo Kuerten, Rod Laver, Ivan Lendl, John McEnroe, Carlos Moya, Andy Murray, Muster, Rafael Nadal, Nastase, Newcombe, Pat Rafter, Marcelo Rios, Andy Roddick, Rosewall, Safin, Pete Sampras, Stan Smith, Vilas, Wawrinka, and Mats Wilander. The categories that we'll be putting these players in are God, which is the top tier of tennis, GOAT, Legend, Magical, Great, and What the Splendid. Let's start with Mr. Andre Agassi. He won 8 Grand Slams, runner-up in 7 of them. He won an Olympic medal, 17 Masters titles, and Davis Cup winner in 1990, 1992, and 1995. He is the only man in the history of the sport to win a career Super Slam. A career Super Slam. How impressive that sounds. This is just the career Grand Slam, plus the Olympic medal, plus the year-end championship, which is like the ATP Tour Finals nowadays, right? He was also the first man to win all Grand Slams on 3 different surfaces. Remember that before the Grand Slams were played in different surfaces. Look, the truth is that this guy was iconic. A lot of people tried to imitate his hairstyle. When he went bald, many uprising players also went bald. The guy was an icon. So, just to start, also because I know who's coming next as well, we're gonna place Andre Agassi as one of the GOATs of tennis. Then we'll see if we move him up, we move him down. But for now, Agassi deserves to be in the GOAT position. Okay, so next is Mr. Arthur Ashe. And if this name sounds familiar to you, yes, that's because the center court at the US Open has his name. And here is when things become troubled in this ranking because, you know, Arthur Ashe played some portion of his career in the Open era, and then another portion of his career in the era where the ATP did not exist. And that's why it's kind of hard to assess the greatness of these players, because there's no doubt that they are awesome, they are really good players, but statistics-wise, it's hard to really measure their accomplishments. I think it's just fair to assume that every player from, you know, this era, you know, Arthur Ashe, Rod Laver, and so on, I think it's fair to assume that we are understating their greatness. We are underestimating them due to the lack of information we have about their careers before the Open era. Regardless, Mr. Arthur Ashe won 3 Grand Slam titles in singles and 2 in doubles. And according to many sports magazines during that time, before the Open era, he was catalogued as the best player in the world. But this man truly deserves a lot of credit because he accomplished amazing things in tennis in a time where there was a lot of racism. First black player to be part of the US Davis Cup team, and first black player to ever win Wimbledon, the Australian Open, and the US Open. Being so charismatic. Many of the information I have read about him is that he was very liked by many people. He just had a really nice charisma on the court. Unfortunately, he passed away in the 1990s, but for sure, his legacy is still alive. I cannot put him at the same level as Andre Agassi. I do not put in doubt his legacy, and I know that he inspired a lot of great players that came after him. That is undisputed. But I think that Andre Agassi in the long run will be regarded as a greater tennis player than Mr. Arthur Ashe. So that for that reason, Arthur Ashe will be in the legend position. Ooh, Mr. Boris Becker, the crazy German, ex-number 1 in the world as well, like Andre Agassi, like Arthur Ashe. And this dude is the youngest Wimbledon winner ever, 17 years old. 17. At 17, I was learning how to do my laundry. And this dude was winning Wimbledon. This guy won 64 titles overall, 49 singles and 15 doubles, 6 Grand Slam single titles, 13 Masters titles, 3 year-end championships, including an Olympic gold medal in doubles in '92, and he led Germany to back-to-back championship wins in the Davis Cup. Okay, so I know that we will see more players in this tier list that, are acrobats and are crazy guys. But look at this picture even, right? That was very characteristic of Boris Becker, and that's iconic. That's iconic for sure. And just like Arthur Ashe, Boris Becker was a master at serve and volley. Anyways, I think Boris Becker has to be magical. He's not up there with Agassi. I don't think so. I don't think he's as a legend as Arthur Ashe. But for sure, I think that saying something less than magical for Boris Becker would not be fair to him. I still have my doubts if maybe this guy should come here as a legend, but for now let's keep him as magical. Next up we have Bjorn Borg, and excuse me, but this guy either goes here or here. And if you want to push me a little bit, Agassi, I'm sorry, but I think Borg is more remarkable. This guy became the first man in the Open era to win 11 Grand Slam titles, 5 consecutive ones at Wimbledon. And what is really crazy about his victories in the Grand Slams was that 3 of those, he won them without losing a single set. Talk about dominance. This Swedish legend also won 3 year-end championships, and he is the source of inspiration for a lot of players that we will see in this tier list as well. I would say even more than Arthur Ashe. And of course, if we talk about Bjorn Borg, we will have to talk about John McEnroe. I know that we all talk about Rafa, Roger, Rafa and Nole and Roger. Even if you want to go a little bit to the previous generations, Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi. But the real gangster rivalry in tennis, the original one, I would say, was Bjorn Borg against John McEnroe. The 1980 Wimbledon final between McEnroe and Borg actually inspired a freaking movie. I actually had the chance to watch this movie when I was in a flight. I was actually going to Toronto to watch the Masters 1000 of Toronto. The movie is pretty good, and yeah, it really helps you understand how big of a deal was Bjorn Borg. And this has to be said as well. Bjorn retired age 25 in 1981 due to personal reasons. I think the guy was just tired of winning everything pretty much. He didn't have to prove anything to himself or nobody else. Probably something along the lines of what happened with Ashe Barty as well recently, right? He tried to come back in 1991, 10 years after that, but his return was not as expected. Of course, tennis had changed a lot, right? The rackets were different. I remember seeing that game of Borg when he came back. The racket he was using, he was very eager to still use the same racket he used to use back in the day. And the rackets were changing, right? The materials, and even the strategy-wise, the game was changing, evolving. Yet, Mr. Bjorn Borg remains to be one of the best players of all time. So yeah, I think Borg has to come before Agassi. Impact, tournaments, he didn't have the longevity like Agassi. I'm sorry, but Bjorn Borg, if you're a tennis fan, yeah, he has to be regarded as one of the greatest of all time, undoubtedly. Why am I not putting this guy here? I could for sure, but I already have an idea of who is coming to the God place, and I think you know as well who's coming there. Let's keep it as a surprise. This is gonna be one of those awkward moments when you know what's gonna happen. You know which guys are gonna come here. I know which guys are gonna come there, but let's just pretend we know nothing. Let's continue with the video. So next up we have Sergi Bruguera here, the Spaniard, and with all due respect to Mr. Bruguera and all his fans, I think we have the first WTF. Of course, being a WTF in this tier list by no means implies that we're talking about a bad player. All of the players here are awesome and for sure contributed to the growth of the sport and really, left a mark. It's just that we're doing relative comparisons here, right? And if we compare Bruguera with Boris Becker, even, and I'm not going to mention Bjorn Borg, Agassi, or Arthur Ashe, Bruguera has to be a WTF. Despite him winning, important things throughout his career. The guy has 2 French Opens. He also got a silver medal in the '96 Olympic Games. Sergi Bruguera is the only player in the history of tennis to have a winning record against, a random player called Roger Federer and another random player called Pete Sampras. The guy has a winning record against both. You know what? That maybe Federer and Sampras. I don't know. That's a good statistic right there. Now, but in all seriousness, he has to remain as a WTF. But of course, really good player. Next up, Jimmy Connors. All right, Connors at least has to be considered a tennis legend. Most titles won in all ATP history, 109. Highest number of matches played, 1,557 matches. And from those, 1,274 wins. Highest number of victories in matches ever. And finished year-end number 1 in the ATP rankings from 74 to 78. And talk about longevity, I guess longevity has to be correlated with the fact that he won so many titles and so many matches played. He retired at the age of 43. Nah, it's unfair for him to be a legend. Jimmy Connors has to be a GOAT. No, of course. Those records are enough. They are enough. Now we have Jim Courier right here. Also former number 1, also American, just like Connors. He won 4 Grand Slams, 5 Masters titles. Now I think Courier has to be either magical or great. I think I'll put him in great for now. Of course, not underestimating him at all, but seeing what's next, I think this suits him. Of course, if I think he has to go up, he will go up. He will for sure not go down. Ooh. I hope that everyone is applauding, because we have the first tennis god in the tier list. Novak Djokovic is a tennis god. Whether you like him, whether you don't, I think it's unfair to say that he is a, perfect person and that he's the devil. I think a lot of tennis fans are in that dilemma. To me, really, Djokovic means a lot. He is the reason why I started playing tennis. He is my favorite tennis player. Now, of course, I won't be biased in this video by my favoritism for Nole, but Nole has to be the god of tennis, or at least one of them for sure. I know there's some guys missing here as well. Novak Djokovic, just to review his career, he holds the record of the highest amount of weeks as number 1 in the world. As of now, 392 when this video is recorded. 24 majors, that's the record. 39 masters, that's the record. And 6 ATP finals. He's the only man to achieve a triple career Grand Slam and the only player to compete a career Golden Masters. He's won all of them. And he has won all of them at least twice. Now, he has to be there. There's no debate here. I'm just reviewing his facts, just to have fun, but there's no discussion. Djokovic is one of the tennis gods, and he will be remembered as such for many more generations to come. Next we have Stefan Edberg, another exponent of the serve and volley style of play. The Swedish has 6 Grand Slam titles in his trophy cabinet, and he is only one of 2 men to have reached the number 1 position both in singles and doubles in the Open era. The other guy, John McEnroe. Also 4 Master Series, and I think that's enough information to consider Edberg as a magical player. And he's magical coming after Boris Becker, because, well, my only parameter here is that Boris Becker has a positive record against Edberg, 25-10. And now we can all clap again, we can all clap really loud. We have Mr. Elegance, Mr. Tennis, Mr. Roger Federer, undoubtedly a god. Absolutely, Roger Federer is tennis, tennis is Roger Federer. We'll just put Roger here right now. Because alphabetically that's where he belongs, but at the end of the video we'll see if he deserves to be here. There's many arguments why he should. The Swede has been number 1 in the world for 310 weeks, 101 singles titles. He was so close to Connors. 20 Grand Slams, out of which I think it's important to say that 8 are Wimbledon. And I know grass is not, the major surface in tennis, but it would be wrong to say that Wimbledon is not the most important tournament in tennis. That's where tennis was born. It's the cathedral of tennis. This man won 8 of them. What else can we say about Roger? I mean, he is definitely the inspiration for the majority of the rising players nowadays, along with Nole and another player that is coming next. But for sure, Roger has to be a tennis god, undoubtedly. He has a negative record against Nole, I have to say that, but don't worry, we'll discuss who is the real tennis god at the end of the video. Now, Juan Carlos Ferrero. And if this guy looks familiar to you, and you are very young, it's probably because you have seen him in Alcaraz's box. He's actually his coach nowadays. And I should make a parenthesis here for Carlitos. The guy is 20, but he already deserves to be here. Of course, he has a very long career to come, and he's just the smile of tennis nowadays. I would put it like that. And I hope, and I think we all should do, that he delivers and he wins more majors and he becomes one of the best in history as well. He's not here because he's very young. Let's not put pressure into him yet. Let's just judge his coach here, Juan Carlos Ferrero. He won 16 ATP Tour titles, including 1 Grand Slam, the French Open, also 4 Masters events. But Juan Carlos Ferrero, we're going to consider him to be a great player. He has become #1 in the world. He can say that absolutely. But I think great suits him really well, given all the monsters we have here above. Oof, Leighton Hewitt. Come on, come on, come on! This guy is an icon. The come on trend, that was him. I know players used to do come on as well before him, he didn't invent it, but he made tennis more popular by doing that. He won 2 Grand Slams, 30 singles titles, 3 doubles titles. He won the Davis Cup twice as well. And at his time, he became the youngest player ever to become #1 in the world, aged 20 years and 8 months. Then of course, Carlitos came. Leighton has to be a great player as well. And I would even push it and say that probably he was greater than Juan Carlos Ferrero. Not only in terms of the record, which is in favor of Hewitt, 6-4, but it's just his presence, his endurance, his fight spirit. Yeah, now we have Yevgeny Kafelnikov. He reached the #1 in the world, 2 Grand Slam titles, and the gold medal at the 2000 Olympics. Also 4 Grand Slam titles in doubles, and undoubtedly one of the greatest players from Russia ever. I think he's gonna be a great player, and I'm gonna put him there after Ferrero, Hewitt, and Courier. Johan Kriek from the Czech Republic. He won 3 Grand Slams, and he has a highest official ranking of #5 in the world. But of course, part of his career was before the Open era as well, so no official records if he ever was #1. Johan Kriek played in the era of Arthur Ashe, but I don't think they are on the same level at all. I don't think he's a legend. At the end of magical, or even great, I would say. Because the thing is that the Wimbledon that he won, it was boycotted, that tournament, because the championship was not letting one player participate, so a lot of players didn't show up, and Kodes ended up winning it. I am going to put Mr. Kodes as a great player. And where? That's the question now. So he won 3 slams, right? Okay, let's put him here. I would say even after Ferrero, after Hewitt, after Courier. And now we have Kriek right here. So Kriek has 2 Grand Slams, in fact 2 Australian Opens. The South African won a total of 14 professional titles in singles and 8 in doubles. And his higher career ranking was #7. He's also the founder of the Global Water Foundation, which is an organization that helps bring water to the neediest communities. Something very admirable. But in this tier list, Mr. Kriek has to be a WTF. We'll put him as the first WTF, very close to being great. We're not trying to diminish someone's career. If anything, we're trying to praise everyone here and just order a stupid list. Next we have Guga Kuerten. Guga was a synonym of fun in the court. #1 in the world, he won 3 majors, the 3 of them were the French Open, 20 single titles, 8 doubles titles, and unfortunately this guy had to deal with a lot of injuries. I think something very comparable to his case is probably Andy Murray. Andy Murray also reached a really high level in 2016, I remember. The injuries came, of course he came back and he's a legend of the sport, but he never came back to the same level, you know. Guga, he went through something similar. Regardless, he remains to be one of the best tennis players of all time. And I think Guga's category is just magical, right? I mean, it makes sense. Guga never played against Becker or Edberg, different generations, but unfortunately, Given the injuries he had, I am going to just leave him here. Boris and Stefan had longer careers than Guga, but Guga stays magical. And here we go with Mr. Rod Laver. I mean, it's kind of the same idea like Arthur Ashe, right? We can see his legacy just in tennis nowadays. The Laver Cup, the Center Court in the Australian Open, that's him, that's the guy. And now the problem with Rod Laver is that, again, like Arthur Ashe, some part of his career was not in the Open era. If we counted both the Open era and what came before the Open era, this guy is the tennis player with the highest number of titles won in history. 198 singles titles, if we count everything, right? Rod won 11 Grand Slams, these are official Grand Slams, and 8 Pro Majors titles. And these Pro Majors were essentially the Grand Slams, but before the Open era started. He completed the Grand Slam, that means winning all majors twice in his career. This guy also was a very important part of the Australian team in the Davis Cup. And again, like many other players I've already talked about, but this guy in particular was a huge source of inspiration for many coming players after him. With those numbers, there's no discussion. Rod Laver has to be a tennis GOAT. Hard to put these guys together here in this category, but it is Rod Laver. So Jimmy, the thing is that putting Jimmy Connors here feels wrong. The guy has the 3 records I mentioned before, you know, number of matches played, number of victories in matches, number of titles in singles. But if we also counted the era that came before the Open era, this guy is up there. This guy is even better than Jimmy Connors if we counted those. It's tough. This is tough. Yeah, I mean, I think this order is fine. Borg, Agassi, Connors. With all respect to Connors, but it somehow feels wrong. But Rod Laver has to come here. Rod Laver has to be regarded as one of the top GOATs of tennis. Now, Ivan Lendl. Ranked world number 1 for 270 weeks. He won 94 singles titles, 8 Grand Slams, and runner-up in 11, and he won 5 year-end championships. Now listen to this statistic, listen very closely. He is the only man in professional tennis history to have a match-winning percentage of over 90% in 5 different years. In terms of playstyle, this guy up to this day is considered the father of the inside-out forehand. One of the most prolific top spin players of all time. And I think it's important to say that his record against all his generational rivals is in his favor. 22-13 against Jimmy Connors and 21-15 against John McEnroe. According to many tennis historians, he was the first modern baseline player. For all these reasons, Lendl has to be a GOAT. Now, where? Well, that's an important question now. And this feels wrong again, but Lendl changed the game in a way. Jimmy as well, don't everyone here did. Okay, I'll stop being politically correct, okay? Lendl is gonna be here and yeah, deal with it. It's my tier list. Bear with me. And something I noticed right now is that Arthur Ashe is lonely here. And I don't like that. So what we'll do is we'll put these guys up in order and we will just eliminate this one. Yeah, that looks much better. Ooh, John McEnroe. The first bad boy in tennis. You cannot be serious! Johnny McEnroe, I have already mentioned him. Very famous player for having rivalries with Borg and Connors. And he's the only player in the history of the game to be ranked number 1 in singles and number 1 in doubles at the same time. Listen to this. He has 77 single titles and 77 doubles titles. Pfft, crazy. And if you combine those two together, he has more than Jimmy Connors. In fact, this combination is the highest number of titles in all the Open era. He won 7 majors, and in 1984, this gentleman probably had the best season a tennis player has ever had. His record was 82 wins and 3 losses. McEnroe is a GOAT. He is. Now the question is where. I know that you can prefer not to like his personality, just like Nick Kyrgios. A lot of people don't like the tennis players act that way. I include myself in that group. I don't know, like I have always seen tennis as a very elegant sport, and see these kind of reactions on court, they throw me off a little bit, to be honest. But I can't say that I am, the perfect example of a tennis fan. A lot of tennis fans, and I would just say sports fans in general, they like drama. They like these kind of different personalities. That's how rivalries also are formed. So John McEnroe has been influential, there's no doubts in that. And for that reason, I'm going to place John McEnroe as a GOAT right after Ivan Lendl. For some reason, I still feel wrong to put Jimmy Connors so far behind in the GOAT debate. You know what? Connors has more Grand Slams, so let's just put Jimmy Connors there. But yet again, personality, and also he has a better record against him. I'm sorry, Connor. I feel so guilty putting Connors there. So guilty. Let's move on. Next up, Carlos Moya. Spaniard, he was number 1 in the world. He won the French Open once, and he was part of the Spanish team that won the Davis Cup as well. Right now we all know him because he is Rafa's coach. But to me, Moya, he was number 1 in the world, so he will be regarded as great. He has to be. And since he is so similar to Ferrero, probably Ferrero a little bit better. In fact, yeah, Ferrero actually has a positive record against Moya, so I'll put Carlos Moya over there. Sir Andy Murray. This guy made me enjoy tennis a lot when I was a kid. And Murray, I think for now I'm gonna put him here as a legend, because that's what my hunch says where he should be. It's very unfortunate that he had to go through so many injuries, but this guy in his prime would beat Roger and Nole. So I think talking about Andy Murray, we have to be very careful with people my age. Yeah, we all know the greatness of Andy. 3 Grand Slam titles. He finished in 2016 as the number 1 in the world, and he reached 11 major finals. That's a lot. He has won 46 ATP singles titles, including 14 Masters 1000s, and he has 2 gold medals in the Olympics. These players in the GOAT level have marked more than Andy in the sport. Now here's debatable. I am going to put Andy here just because I think that these 4 players here also have done a really great job, but it's very hard to compare, right? These are players from older generations. They never played against Andy, so we would never know who would win in the game. Tommy Muster. And when he was active, his nickname was the King of Clay. Yeah, this guy was the King of Clay. Wait, wasn't another guy also named the King of Clay? Oh, he's coming next. Let's focus on Muster for now. Muster has won 1 major, the French Open. He reached number 1 in the world, and he won 8 Master Series. And for Austrians, I know that Muster is up there as one of the best sportsmen ever. So Thomas Muster has to be great. Now where exactly to place him, that's a different question. I am going to play Muster over here. Yes, over there. I think it suits him, also given the record that he has against Kafelnikov. It's a better record, so I'm gonna put him there in the great tier. And then I think this is gonna be the last time that we're clapping. Of course, we all knew that the big 3 were going to be the gods. These guys have accomplished so much. But let's focus on Rafa, the King of Clay. Number 1 in the world for 209 weeks, 22 majors in his pocket, 36 Masters titles, a total of 92 ATP singles titles, and 63 of them on clay. Just so you see the dominance that Rafa has had on this surface. He has won a record 14 French Open titles. Now we see that Rod Laver is the name of the center court in the Australian Open. Arthur Ashe is the name of the center court in the US Open. It's a matter of time, and we all know that the center court of the French Open will be named Rafael Nadal. His rivalry against Federer, his rivalry against Djokovic, he always fights and gives the 110% every single time he's in the court. So in my opinion, how I would put it is Rafa is power of will, heart. Roger is elegance, finesse. Djokovic is mind. Of course, I'm not saying that they are just that, but We will talk about who goes first and who goes second and third at the end of the video. Now, Ilie Nastase. He's won 64 singles titles, 45 doubles titles. He was number 1 in the world. He won 2 majors in singles. Nastase played in the Open era and also before the Open era. So, hard to tell again how to compare him relative to other players. But I think it's fair to say that Nastase was a great player. And we are going to put him probably right after Hewitt. It's incomparable to say that Nastase is better than Hewitt, Ferrero or Moya. They never played against one another. Different tennis as well, different eras. It's just a personal preference. I don't think he's as good as Courier, but he's up there. Now John Newcombe, the Australian, he won 7 majors in singles and 17 in doubles, and he is widely beloved in Australia. According to many historians, John Newcombe had a unique way of playing tennis, but also very charismatic. I mean, look at his map, come on. And here, I must be truthful to myself. I watched some videos of Newcombe, but I am gonna let myself guide through the historians here. Historians place him as a really prominent player back in the day. I am going to put him over here just after Edberg as a legend of the sport. With the research that I've done to make this video, he deserves to be a legend. Following, we have Pat Rafter, also Australian, also former number 1 in the world. Rafter has 2 major titles in singles, 11 career titles in singles as well, and he has a very interesting fact when it comes to his rivalry with Roger Federer. They didn't have a rivalry, but in the matches they played against one another. Rafter is the only player to remain undefeated against Federer with at least 3 meetings between each other. And he's also the only player with a winning record over Roger on all 3 main surfaces. I don't think he's a legend of the sport, I don't think he's a GOAT, I think he's a great player. I am going to place Rafter over here because he has a winning record against Muster, and I think it fits him well. Following is Marcelo Rios, and Rios also was a former number 1 in the world, first Latin American player to do so. As a fun fact, he is the shortest man ever to hold the number 1 position in the world, 5 feet and 9 inches. Rios is also the only man in all the Open era to have held the number 1 position in the ranking but never win a singles Grand Slam title. Considering this, Rios will have to be great because my criteria is that if you're number 1 in the world, you cannot be a WTF, but he's coming here, I would say, as the last of the great ones in this tier list. Now we have Andy Roddick. This is the only player I have seen break a tennis ball with a service. You should watch that video, it's available on YouTube somewhere. Former number 1 player in the world, he won 1 US Open, part of the Davis Cup winning team of the US in 2007, 5 Masters titles, and by all means a very charismatic player. Andy, again, I think we'll go with Marcelo Rios in the great category. And I'm going to place him here right before Ferrero because Andy has a positive record against him, he has a positive record against Moya, and he has a positive record against Marcelo Rios as well. Another Aussie on the list, this is Ken Rosewall, and Rosewall won 147 singles titles, including 15 Pro Majors. Remember, Pro Majors is just how we used to call the Grand Slams before the Open era started. And he still won 8 Grand Slam titles once the Open era began. So if you add them up, that's 23 majors right there. He also won 15 Pro Majors doubles titles and 9 Grand Slam doubles titles as well. According to historians and to some of the videos I could watch, his backhand was his shot. Ken Rosewall's nickname was Muscles, ironically, because he was very thin. All in all, Ken Rosewall has to be a GOAT, and I am going to place him right after Bjorn Borg, just for the fact that this guy virtually won 23 majors. The Russian Marat Safin, former number 1 in the world, Davis Cup winner, winner of 2 Grand Slam singles titles, a very strong baseliner. He also had to deal with many injuries throughout his career, but still, he's widely regarded in Russia at least as one of the best tennis players in that country. Marat Safin, in my opinion, is also a great player, and I am going to place him right before Muster due to a positive record against him. And in fact, before starting with Pistol Pete, let me make an adjustment here. I think Bjorn should come here due to the number of Grand Slam titles. Rosewall should stay there, and now Pete Sampras, I think, is accurately placed over here in the GOAT debate of tennis. And what can we say about Sampras? I mean, Pistol Pete, he has 14 Grand Slam titles in singles. Before the era of the Big Three, I remember every journalist was saying, oh, no one will ever surpass Pete Sampras. Pete Sampras is the greatest of all. Yeah, and then we all know what happened with Roger, Rafa, and Nole. But regardless, this gentleman is tennis history. 64 ATP Tour level singles titles, 286 weeks as the number one player in the world. He has a favorable record against Agassi, Becker, Connors, Courier, Stefan Edberg, Kafelnikov, Kuerten, Ivan Lendl, John McEnroe, Carlos Moya, Muster, Rafter, Rios, and Mats Wilander, who is coming next. Pete Sampras is, again, inspiration to many. He has to be in the GOAT category. Stan Smith, former number one player in the world, winning the US Open and Wimbledon. And besides having a very prolific career, he is very famous because Adidas branded one of their shoes as the Stan Smith Adidas shoes. This kind of goes in line with Michael Jordan, right? I mean, it's all having an impact. Now, imagine you are part of a sport and at the end of your career, a piece of clothing has your name. How relevant do you have to be for that to happen? So, excuse me everyone in the great category, but I'm gonna put Stan Smith as a legend. After Andy Murray, I'm gonna put him there. One of the last ones now, Guillermo Vilas. Guillermo Vilas is definitely a legend of the sport. I'm gonna put him over there between Newcombe and Koerten. And mainly because, sure, he had a really nice career, we will just tell the facts right now, but this guy invented the twinner. The most visually aesthetic, beautiful shot in tennis. You know, at the end of every year that they make a compilation of the best points and you are guaranteed to see at least 5 twinners in the top 10 best plays of the year. Okay, this guy created that. In Spanish, actually, his name is referenced in the name of the play. You don't say twinner in Spanish, you say La Gran Willy. Willy for Guillermo Vilas. 4 Grand Slam titles, former number one in the world, but according to the ATP rankings, he picked up number 2. But again, many historians place him as the best player in some years before the Open era started. Guillermo Vilas is a legend. Stan Wawrinka, Stan the man. We all know Stan, I don't think we need to introduce him. The highest pick of Stan was number 3 in the world. He won 3 Grand Slam titles, which I don't know about you, but to me, is a breakthrough. This guy competed against the big 3 and Andy Murray, and he made it with 3 Grand Slam titles. That's nuts. Gold medals in the Olympics, and probably one of the most aesthetic backhands to ever exist. Regardless, I mean, it's kind of obvious considering all the names we have here, but Stan has to be a WTF. I love Stan, don't get me wrong. I have seen him play live. I never saw Bruguera play live. I never saw Kriek play. So, you know what? Let me put Wawrinka in the number 1 WTF position. Just because. And finally, the last player, Mats Wilander. Former number 1 Swedish, 7 major singles titles, and he won the French Open aged 17. And only Wilander, Rafa and Nole won at least 2 major singles titles on grass, hard and clay courts. So clearly, Wilander is not just a random dude, he is part of the history of tennis, and I think he should be regarded as a legend. And I am placing Wilander right in between Newcombe and Guillermo Vilas. Alright, well, I don't really know if you made it this far in the video. If you did, I appreciate you so much. I had a lot of fun doing this. This is how my ranking ends. Of course, now the sassiest part of the video and the most controversial one comes because I'm gonna place these 3 gentlemen in order. Nole, Roger, and Raf. Nole has a positive record against both. Nole has more Grand Slam titles. Nole has more Masters 1000. And Nole has more weeks as the number 1 player in the world. To me, that is enough information to assert that Djokovic is the tennis god. Now, fans of Roger and Rafa, you can always claim that Roger and Rafa are more charismatic than Djokovic, in the sense that probably Rafa and Roger have more fans than Djokovic, I'll give you that. But the thing about Djokovic, I think he has had very questionable attitudes throughout his career, but I legitimately think he has a good heart. He does a lot of charity work, he's a very nice guy with kids. I think he is depicted as someone he isn't by many tennis fans. So if you want to play the charisma card with Rafa and Roger having more fans, or even being more influential in the sport, because I mean that's correlated with fans as well, okay, I'll give you that. I mean, I can understand that argument, but regardless, in numbers, Djokovic is an undisputed best player of all time in male tennis history. And now number 2 is when it becomes interesting, right? Because you have Rafa having more Grand Slam titles than Roger, Rafa having a positive record against Roger, but then Roger has more weeks as number 1 in the world. Roger has more titles than Rafa. Roger has more victories than Rafa in matches. So here, there's arguments on both sides. So I will tell you my rationale to say why I think Roger Federer is the second best player of all time. I am not gonna say that Rafa deserves to be third. I think that it is very defendable to say that Rafa is the second best player of all time. I really think so. But in my opinion, and here I open the debate, let's see what you think, having more weeks as number 1 in the world, especially by the margin that Roger has over Nadal, is worth more in the long run than 2 Grand Slam titles, which is the difference in Grand Slam titles between Roger and Rafa. And again, I am really okay with thinking that Nadal is the second best ever. And also remember that his career is not over yet, right? I mean, the guy has, I think he has gas for 1 more year. And don't get me wrong, if he is back by the time the French Open begins, not putting pressure on him at all, but he is the candidate. But when it comes to impact on the sport, I don't think that in the modern era, at least, we have seen a person like Roger Federer. Elegance, class. That's what tennis is about. I mentioned it earlier. Tennis is Federer, Federer is tennis. And I stand by those words. Roger has to be second. I would be blind if I didn't appreciate his greatness. Once again, I would like to thank you a lot if you made it this far. Of course, I am doing this for fun myself. I love tennis and reviewing the history of the sport and all these magnificent players. It just puts a smile on my face. Please leave a comment if you agree or if you disagree with what I did here. Let me know and we can learn more together. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you around. Bye bye.